Are you someone who have been through a 12th house Pluto transit or someone just about to have one? Then this video series is for you. I am planning to divide the 12th house Pluto transit into 3 parts so as to give an in-depth analysis of what kind of themes to expect during this transit and some tips to navigate this transit in a way to achieve the highest positive transformation possible. When Pluto transited the sign of Capricorn from 2008, the Aquarius risings experienced this transit in the 12th house because Capricorn is their 12th house sign. Okay? And now Pluto is transiting the sign of Aquarius, the Pisces rising will be experiencing this in the 12th house. So some of the themes or some of the health issues that might come up during this transit may be linked to this sign and the organs associated with the sign. For example, when Pluto transited the sign of Capricorn, Capricorn is associated with the bones, joints, knees, skin, and hair, right? So many of the Aquarius risings were having health issues related to their bones, joints, skin or hair thinning problems or the teeth problems. And this was the common illnesses that was found for Aquarius risings during this transit. So now when it comes to the Pisces risings, it would be helpful if they keep an eye on these organs that is associated with Aquarius, such as the calf, ankle, shin, and Achilles. So mostly the leg part as well as the blood circulation or the circulatory system that is also in fact associated with Aquarius. So it would be helpful if you could take more care on these parts so as to mitigate the health issues during this transit. This series is my own personal experience of this Pluto transit in my 12th house. So I have come across many descriptions of this transit, but having experienced it in my own life, I can definitely say there's a lot more layers to the 12th house Pluto transit other than the mere superficial information you find online. So Pluto transiting 12th house is neither just doom and gloom, nor is it a magical or mystical experience. I would say it's a hybrid of both experiences. So being a Pluto dominant person myself, I can definitely say that this transit have transformed me beyond my imagination over the past many years. You will never know when you're going through the transit, but once the transit is over and when you look back, you can see the impact of this transit on your psyche and on your overall personality. And this transit is actually preparing you for the next major transit, which is the first house transit. And it is definitely going to strip away everything that is not required for you to take it onto the next level. Okay? So my 12th house is in the sign of Capricorn, and the Pluto transited Capricorn back in 2008. So let me take you all through my journey over the past many years, all my lessons and the transformations, and also my tips to help you navigate the 12th house transits, especially could be useful for Pisces risings with Aquarius in your 12th house. But do note that everything that happened with me may not resonate with everyone, as other factors in your natal chart needs to be taken into account as well. For example, if Pluto is transiting to your 12th house and it's opposing or squiring your major inner planets, that could add another layer of suffering or transformation. Okay, so some of the major themes that I faced during this transit. Let's start with the first one. It began with some sort of undiagnosed illnesses or severe health issues that couldn't be diagnosed by any healthcare system, which was, of course, a very difficult part of this transit personally for me. And second major theme was the psychological and mental health problems that I had to deal with on a daily basis due to this transit. Third theme, some of the most mystical experiences and some of the extreme intuition or ability to see into the future. I was able to get that during this transit. And I also started falling in love with solitude and finding myself through the act of being alone and enjoying that moments of solitude. And another major thing which I didn't understand at that point of time was the dark night of the soul feeling, or, getting lost, getting completely lost. And also finding spirituality against the structured religion that I was following until that moment. It was a sudden shift. I ended my focus on religious aspects and instead I started following spirituality, learning about the spirituality without those strict structures. So that was something that I have gone through during this time period. And this was a wonderful transit, I have to say, in getting to know my own soul in a deep sense, in seeing everybody's soul through a lens of understanding. And another theme was the feeling of ecstasy or oneness with nature and animals and all the plant species. It was a sort of compassion that you could never feel otherwise, a deep compassion towards every single living and non-living being on this universe. The next theme was probably the psychological and emotional boundaries, the dissolving of boundaries and feeling affected by how to navigate relationships without feeling lost in the relationships. There were times when I couldn't understand where I ended and the other began. It was almost merging with others. So this also ended up in soaking the pain and negative emotions from others or the collective emotions from the world itself. There was a lot of projections onto me. Some people saw me as savior, and some people just projected their negativity to me. So I was a kind of mirror to others. If someone says I was not good enough, or I was that way, I would end up that way. Or if someone sees the best in me, I end up in that way as well. So it was always about how I pick up on other people. And at that time, I never knew how to choose the right people around me because I was always soaking up all kinds of emotions from others. And another major theme during this transit that I would recommend you to look out for was extreme feelings of shame or guilt. During this transit, I had to take up the role of a caretaker to my sick mother, and people were projecting onto me their negativity or desires and sometimes playing that negative role just to realize later it wasn't my own in the first place. And for everything that went wrong, I was quick to take the accountability that I was the reason for the people's suffering and always feeling guilt for considering my happiness. Good day out with friends, I used to avoid that because there was someone else who was close to me suffering. And I was taking up that suffering into me, and I felt bad to go out with friends to enjoy myself because in my mind it was wrong. And this was what happened continuously during this transit. And also another major theme was that I started getting this sudden knowing or interest in mystical subjects, astrology, human design, spirituality. It was all of a sudden I was being thrown into this knowledge, or the vast mystical knowledge that have hugely helped me navigate this transit. So now this is what comes up when I think about the themes that I have been through during this transit. Maybe I might come up with more themes if I remember in between. But anyways, let's continue with this journey. And let me take you through some of my experiences during this transit so that it could help you navigate yours on. If you are, of course, a Pisces rising, so Pluto is now in Aquarius, and it is going to transit your 12th house. If you're using the whole sign, and if you're using the Placidius, you have to look at the degree where your 12th house starts. So yeah, without further ado, let's begin. Maybe I should go back to the year 2011 when the transiting Pluto dipped its feet into my 12th house. And it was a very profound transit, I must say. And in fact, a very deep transit for me. Okay, so back to 2011, and I would be around 16 years of age, or soon to be 17. So that was a very young age to have this kind of difficult transit in one lifetime. So I was very young at that time, I would have to say. And I couldn't understand what were the things that were happening in my life, like one after the other, just threw me into deep darkness at that point. This transit started with so many insecurities that came to forefront. I was deeply feeling insecure when Pluto actually transited there. And I was always in this continuous feeling that I was not good enough and always wanted to be the best out of everyone. I was rather a very introverted person or shy kid, I would say. But when I would see someone was gaining attention of everyone around me, I would start acting too awkward or too loud or over dramatic several times just to get the people's attention and just to get that popularity, like my friend, and which was not myself, of course, but that was the kind of foolishness I used to do at that during the beginning of the transit. It was the transit that helped me actually dig into that behavior, because it went back to my childhood and my relationship with my absent parents. So I used to feel safe and recognized even when someone gave me a slight attention. So during this period, that was coming forefront. So it's of course our subconscious behaviors that would come to the surface during this transit. So make sure you're keeping an attention to those signs and signals. And even though I was acting like I was enjoying everything around me, I was acting too happy and everything, deep inside I was feeling much insecure and extremely lonely. And I couldn't understand why, and I couldn't understand what was the reason behind this. There was no reason, but I was feeling extremely lonely at that time. And I was starting to lose friends as well. Like everybody was somehow leaving my company to form different friends groups or gangs, if you understand what I'm saying. So the beginning of the 12th house transit events, I could say it could be traced back to my first ever unknown, serious viral eye infection that I caught. I don't know how it happened. Why did that happen? I have no idea. I was just sitting, just like every day, sitting and I guess I was listening to some music, and suddenly my eyes started itching. And then the very next day, my eyes were totally, completely irritated and blurred. And I was it was fully red and couldn't even see properly. And that was a very difficult time at that point. And also it was at that point that I went to see the doctor to get a diagnosis, and the doctor couldn't find what kind of infection that was, or what was the reason behind that eye infection or anything. And I was being put under several medicines or meds, and basically steroid medicines. And all he just said was, let's hope for the best. Sometimes this might last until your death. Like this could be a long-term disease without any cure, or you could even go completely blind. That was my situation. I got really scared. I didn't know what to do. It almost felt like a deep ending to my life. Like, it was sudden, unexpected. I couldn't see. And that was the biggest fear I could ever have. And it was affecting both my eyes, especially my left eye, I would say. That was terrible for me, to be honest. Just imagine. So the Pluto transit started with a sudden disease without any known cure. And that just put my world upside down. And I still remember that day, with me being in my room. Suddenly my eyes started to itch very badly, got the red eye. And yeah, that started everything, I would say. And that was a literal hell. And then it was continuous travel to the hospital with my mother. And I was very happy, at least I had her with me. Like, she was my strongest pillar in my life at that point of time, because none of us knew what was happening at that time, right? But she was there for me. She was there with me for visiting the hospitals. And yeah, lots of steroids, lot of eye drops, lot of medicines. That was it. That is something I still remember. And the very next day when I went back to the school, all my classmates were making fun of that condition. And that was something that really hurted me, because I would never do that to someone else who would have been suffering the same fate, right? And that made me realize the real human nature or real human behaviors. This transit helped me realize that humans are not very good nor very bad. They are like shades of gray, I would say. There is no black and white in human behavior. Everybody has got the darker side as well. So that was something I came across during this transit. And it felt very painful, to be honest, I would have to say, seeing people making fun of my condition or health condition at that time. And of course, this brought forth so many fears, insecurities, and unworthiness as well. And I felt like it was so hard to focus on my studies. My mind started wandering so much during this transit. Like, I was one of the best top scoring student in my school, but suddenly I was feeling completely drained and not being able to focus on anything. But one thing that helped me at that point of time, or during this entire transit, was journaling. And I recommend everybody going through this transit to just keep on journaling, because there will be times, or most of the times, nobody is going to understand you, what you're going through, your deepest fears, your insecurities, or whatever it is. Sometimes you may not understand what I'm trying to say either. And most of the things that we are experiencing couldn't be even put into words in a way that other person could understand. But the best way you could actually put this out is through journaling. Write down whatever you're feeling. Motivate yourself like a third person, or as a you be your own therapist at times. And that really helps, I would have to say. So keep an eye on journaling and writing diary daily. It will help you ground yourself during those moments. And my eyes were hurting so much, and the frequent visits to the doctor made question my own beauty and worthiness. I felt very ugly from inside. And the frustrating thing is that these unexpected traumatic events took place one after the other without any breaks, purging me into deep well of darkness. And another major incident that happened was my mother, whose south node is in Capricorn, which also conjuncted the transiting Pluto at that time to her south node, and she suddenly fell completely ill. She had a stroke, her vocal cord paralyzed, her hands got paralyzed. It was an extreme situation and nobody could understand what's happening with her either. So on one hand, I was having this severe eye disease and situation with that, as well as the allergies. I was having sinusitis, everything associated with allergy condition. And on the other hand, my mother was suffering severely with her condition as well. And nobody knows why that happened. And for some days, she was hospitalized, and the doctors not knowing what to do, why that happened to her. Nobody knows the reason. And she had to put on all those foot tubes, and I was feeling the lowest. Like it was almost like, are we going to lose my mother or not? It was a very extremely draining situation, to be honest. And it was during this transit I saw the darker shades of my relatives as well. So yeah, life showed me it was not that easy at this point. And then there came the money situation, because it took a lot of money to treat her or get the treatment for her health issue as well as my health issue. And we didn't have a stable source of income either. And that was a huge financial problem that we were facing at that time. And I, being the eldest, it was almost like I had to take on the responsibility for the family. And my father was actually kind of absent father. He was not there for anything. He was not the provider. He didn't earn any sort of money for the house. So it was a very difficult time, to be honest. And then I started getting all sorts of issues with the bones, with the teeth. There were so many issues with my teeth placements, and that started getting me very insecure. And because of my teeth, I was not that confident enough to smile. So that was another thing. And my hair started getting thinner and thinner day by day. Started having thinning problems, and there was this scalp issues, balding issues, losing hair, alopecia, everything. And then there was this knock knee issue, which suddenly I noticed at that transit. I don't know if it was there from childhood or it just started suddenly, because that was the time that I realized I was having knock knees. Funny enough for this transit. So yeah. And then there was also this issue with my mother. She started becoming more controlling as well, maybe because it was due to her own fears. I don't know. Her controlling behaviors were also coming to forefront during that time. But I was too ignorant and codependent on her at that point, So especially it was evident when my friends used to visit my home. So she would be just staring at us at some time and shouting like she was not interested in me bringing friends to home. Maybe it was her own insecurities at that point, because she was completely unwell at that time. She was paralyzed, and she was not happy seeing me enjoy some time with friends or anything. It might have been to do with her own emotional insecurities or issues, whatever. She was projecting that over to me. So again, I became more isolated than ever. Then I started becoming, it started to become very difficult for me to bring others to my house after that incident, I would say. And this was also a transit where I realized my mother's narcissistic behaviors. And maybe that's the reason why I used to feel like hiding money matters from her, as well as not bringing my friends home. I don't know, she never behaved properly or hosted anyone other than her own friends and family members. And that was very humiliating to me. She only cared for people who gave her more attention and who was more useful to her in any ways. So my friends never mattered for her. She never liked them anyways. And yeah, as I mentioned, Pluto transiting my 12th house also brought to the surface the extreme darkness of my relatives. Maybe this was related to some sort of ancestral karma that was brought up during this transit. And that was the most obvious thing that transformed me entirely, I would say. Those ancestral problems, family dramas, those generational trauma, everything was hitting me very deeply at that point. They were trying to place me in a cage, and I myself sabotaged a lot many times and kept myself very small or too small, hiding from everything, hiding from the world, hiding from everyone. I never felt worthy enough to make a living by myself, or I never knew what to do. It was almost like that pitch black darkness, not knowing what to do next. I didn't have any financial support. I was totally lost at that point, I would say. So yeah, that was something that was very obvious. And I also realized how much of narrow-minded people most of the human beings were. And there was a hell of time to my mental health, and it started getting fully affected during this transit, I would say. And there were so many entirely fated events. Like, you can feel that it was very fated to happen, most of the events. So most of the things that happened during this transit, I couldn't understand why. Everything was happening all of a sudden. Everything was happening outside my control. There was nothing I could do, and yet I was trying my best to control the situations, and that made me more lost and more lonely than ever. And of course, my mother's health started getting worse and worse. She couldn't swallow food, and and it almost felt like everything was falling apart. And I started feeling that I am not capable of taking care of her in the right way, because whatever I did didn't help her in any ways, and she was not happy with the way I was taking care of her. I was feeling exhausted as well. All I wanted to do was just run away from my home, run away from everyone I knew, and just hide somewhere. That was all I wanted to do during this transit, because she was the pillar of our family, and when suddenly all these things were happening, everything just completely shook our foundation. And it felt almost like piercing a knife through my chest, I would say. I got completely lost in extreme fear. And this transit also showed the fact that my dad or my father was such an incapable man, unable to stand strong in the face of adversity, always hiding and avoiding the responsibilities, which I really hated. And in some way, I was able to relate myself to that same behaviors that I hated in myself. And that was something that opened my eyes that I was also the same like my father. Even though I was trying to force myself to keep everything calm and cool and everything, there was so much fear behind that. And that was my biggest fear of my life, because she was the person who took care of the family, right? She was the everything. And when she had suddenly all these health issues, it was almost like a love-hate relationship with her. But at one point I was feeling completely lost, because that was my biggest fear. What if I lose her? I don't know. I was feeling completely lost. And it was a lot of hospital visits during this transit, I would say. And my mind was going through phases of extreme worry, sadness, feeling of losing her, and phases of complete dissociation, like everything is all right. It was completely switching between everything is falling apart, and then coming to another way of dissociation, that everything is going all right. And I couldn't control my emotions. I didn't know how to adapt to the situation, because when it was required for me to be very sad, I used to laugh, because I couldn't regulate my emotions. I would be very sad, but I couldn't portray that emotion outside. And that was another thing that I was facing at this transit. At times I would cry hard with difficulty in breathing, as if my heart just stopped with heaviness near my throat. And the fears were basically survival based. How will we handle life if she's not around? But this transit actually showed my people-pleasing tendencies, and I started questioning myself. If nobody can help me, why the hell am I trying to please others? Because nobody is there to help me survive any of these difficult times. And that helped me to detach myself from this negative behavior of people-pleasing, because that was my survival-based approach, right? So I was able to break away from that negative tendency during this transit. So there was a wake-up call for me, and I stopped relying on others' approval, and in fact tried to take charge of my life as well during this transit, I had to say. This Pluto transit also made me realize, or showed me, that anything and everything could be taken away from my life, and to not take anything for granted. Also, there is no point in trying to hold on to anything and trying to control anything. These are forces beyond our control, and what's meant to happen will happen anyways. Try what you can to counter that situation, and if it doesn't work, let it go. This was the biggest lesson I learned during this transit. There's no point in fighting, And when things just fall apart beyond your control, what you can do is look into your sixth house. So what is your sixth house? It's daily routines. So something I learned during this transit, even it took a long time for me to realize, was that when on one hand everything was like Pluto was transiting my 12th house, it's the subconscious mind, it's the hidden enemies, it's forces beyond your control. So that is something that you cannot control in any ways. But when you look at the opposite house, which is the sixth house, there you can have some sort of control. So what helped me was I started taking daily routines into my hands. So I couldn't do anything because I was too overwhelmed. It was not like I could put a structure or timetable every day and just, tick off the list, to-do list. That never went well with me because it was too overwhelming for me to follow a, a strict routine. But what helped me was I would just put two things into perspective. One was to take care of my health. So even if I feel the worst that day, I make sure I make food and I eat healthy every single day. It doesn't matter at what time. What matters is I should eat good food every day, no matter what. And I try to limit my intake of junk food, and also made sure I don't go to bed starving myself, because that was affecting my health for a very long time during this transit. And the second major thing was taking care of my hygiene. So this transit almost destroyed my hygiene habits and my food habits, I would have to say. So I was completely lost. I was not taking care of my hygienic needs. Bathing or cleaning myself felt like hell. Like it was too much of an effort, and I used to skip it, and that caused a lot of skin issues and teeth, lot of cavities, lot of teeth issues, because I wasn't brushing every single day, I would have to say, because yes, when your mental health is completely destroyed, this happens. Okay, so with this transit, I learned to ask this question every time I face a difficult situation, which is, what's the worst that could happen? And this question deals the difficult situations in a much clearer way. Thing that could happen, death, right? And that is inevitable. In one way or another way, we all face death one day. So what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And this very thing, this very knowledge helped me navigate many difficult situations, which was far beyond my control. And letting go of my attachment to things, money, places, people was the hardest lesson I learned. Everything that I held dear were taken away, or the bond with my close ones broken in such a way that it couldn't be fixed anymore. But let me tell you, once this transit is over, you could see why these things or why these close relationships were taken away from you, and it will be replaced by something much better in your life. And know that whatever needs to be left is being taken away so that you could enter a new life once Pluto enters your first house. So no worries of what is leaving your life at this transit period, because you can never understand why things are happening in your life during the transit. You can only understand it backwards when you finish this transit. Okay, so this is very important to keep in mind. And there were situations where intense fear used to consume me. So my intense fear, during my teenage years were like, if I don't get good grades in, the school examinations, my entire self or self-worth or self-respect that I used to get from others, or my self-respect always depended on my achievements and how others viewed that. So this transit helped me break away this fear, and it showed me that this was the biggest illusion of human mind, that our self-worth or our worth is dependent on how others perceive us and the things we do to keep that level of status in the society. So this was taken away from me. And another thing is that in this transit, you will also come across situations, or you will also get things that you have always craved for, or that status symbol or whatever you used to. And with this transit, you might also achieve things or situations that you have always dreamt about or always wanted to achieve, but it was far beyond your reach. You may achieve those successes, but what happens is once you achieve that success, you will understand that it's just meaningless in your life, or it doesn't give you the happiness that you thought you would get if you have achieved that success or whatever you keep or put your mind into. Sometimes it might be easier to get things that you dream of, but again, the things that you achieve during this transit will teach you that even if you achieve what you wished for, or something else will happen in such a way that this achievement or this success doesn't matter at all in the big picture. For instance, I thought, I always, as I said, during my studies, everything was falling apart, and it was just a dream that I would score the highest rank holder in my studies. And I did achieve that. But after that, it was of no use with my marks. My life didn't go as I wanted it to go. The marks didn't help me navigate or help me get into any of the prestigious institutions, even though I was the top ranker of my school. So this is what happens during this transit. And you will also come across a lot of miracles during this transit. You will find that even without putting much effort like others do, you will be able to achieve success much faster at times. If this transit Pluto is not opposing or squiring your personal planets, of course, that becomes a different scenario in that case. And a major lesson during this transit was that, so the Pluto in 12th house transit made me realize whenever I let go of a controlling situation and surrender to the universe, asking for help, I will get help in the most miraculous ways. And it requires to let go of the fear and surrender in the first place. So keep this in mind, if a situation is completely out of your control, instead of delving into that fear, like nothing is going to change the situation, just let go of that incident and focus on something else. And you will see that the next moment, that situation is being cleared for you in the most miraculous ways, with a solution that you have never even imagined. See, so that you could come across such miracles during this transit. So basically, nothing is in our hands during this transit. So just give up your fears, let it go, trust the universe. Everything happens for a reason and for your highest good. So this is something that you can keep in mind during this transit. Yeah, so basically the Pluto transit gave me things I longed for. I was even able to travel abroad, which was my biggest childhood dream. And this transit made it possible. I was able to travel far away from my home country. Something that I have been longing for a very long time, and that happened during this transit. So it's not all gloom and doom, but I never felt any innate happiness or satisfaction after receiving these gifts. or getting everything that I have wished for. And it felt like whatever I received never led to any benefits further, like no use at all. That was something that happened. So it was almost like all my rose-colored glasses were being shattered all at once. Yet, there were moments in this journey that I really enjoyed as well. So it's not it's something that you cannot understand with your mind. So let me tell you that when Pluto is transiting through your 12th house, and especially if you are a Pluto dominant person. So yeah, this is something I have to tell you. You cannot understand everything with your mind during this transit, but you're going to change a lot. You're going to understand a lot of your inner world. You're going to understand people's motivation, everything. You're going to learn a lot. Trust me on this. And of course, in many situations, you're going to end up very alone and lonely. And the only way to handle this is to start loving your solitude, to have that happiness with this alone time. You're going to learn a lot about your inner self during this solo time with yourself. And it's better you give yourself some time alone every single day, because otherwise it's going to mess up your mental health a great deal, because you are going to absorb a lot of the negative emotions from people, and you will feel very overwhelmed with groups of people many times. And if you're being with the wrong person, with the wrong intention, you can never understand at that point. You may act in a very nasty way, or what could I say, in a very negative way, but know that it's not you. You're picking up their emotional or their vibration, and you playing out the lowest vibration of yourself. So keeping that emotional boundaries, it's very important. People are going to take advantage of you. So it's very important you understand that. And the best thing to do is not to get lost in someone else or the suffering of the world. You may develop this mentality during this transit of trying to save every suffering person out there. And you end up feeling completely drowned in suffering. Know that this could be a thing that would come up, especially if you are a sensitive soul in the first place. Okay? So this is something that you have to keep in mind as well. And then what else? Yeah, so isolation is a huge theme during this transit. Either it comes to you with willingness or without willingness. So that is something you have to deal with on a regular basis, I would say. So it's very important to keep yourself away from the public at times, and it's most safest thing to do as well. And be conscious, or be aware of the people you're surrounding with. The people whom you might be thinking are very positive for you might not be the right, may not be positive in reality. Like there's some sort of fogginess that you cannot clearly see the other during this transit, and yet you can provoke others as well without you doing it consciously, because of their own trauma and their own subconscious issues. They might get provoked and may provoke you as well. So it's very important to keep those boundaries intact. It's good to go into reading habits, try some spiritual books, something related to boundaries, and it would be very good for your mental health. And once the transit is over, you're just going to come out of that cocoon as a butterfly, let me tell you. And you might be also going through lots of humiliation, and through people's projections, and you being shamed for something that you are not even part of. People could assume worst about you, and it's not your fault. Know that. Don't accept everything what others portray onto you. That is something very important. Don't think you are a bad person just because people in this transit. Otherwise, you might get lost in that. And it's very important that once you understand that some people are not good for you, it's very important to cut off contact with those people and remove yourself from those situations. Otherwise, it's going to really get affected onto your mental health and further your physical health as well. So many of those people or incidences are not under our control. But if you can control, know when to leave. It's very important. Don't, the darkness. So that's very important for you. And it was during this transit that some of my childhood behaviors, like I was afraid of direct confrontation or direct questioning. And that was a dark side of this transit in me. Something I learned, that direct communication was not there for me, or the difficult conversations, I would never engage in that. And heavy with burdens, like you would be trying to do everything for others, but yet not being appreciated the way you want it to be, or them thinking that you're not good enough. You're going to hear all these things, and know that solitude is your friend. So if you think that a place or the people around you or the situations are draining you, if you can find a solution or a chance to get away from that environment, do that at all cost. Because you're going to feel very insecure and unworthy of all these criticisms from others, responsibilities, as everything felt too heavy for me, too much for me to do. And it was a constant memory that I wasn't good enough for anything, and I was always in the bad company of people as well. So there was not even a stable, reliable person whom I could depend on during this transit, and was very heavy for me, be it in the financial way or in every single aspect of my life. I was failing as well, not knowing what I was going through or doing. And that was very difficult, I have to say. So it was a transit where I tried to hide my low self-confidence or low self-esteem under achievements, but that also broke loose at times to unknown territories, and the power struggles wouldn't be less even there. So you have to face those power struggles everywhere you go as well. So, and also this transit also magically cured my never curable viral eye infection, like a complete miracle. Like the same eye infection that I started during the beginning of this transit, it just got miraculously cured one single day after getting a severe fever. So this was how it worked for me. Till to this date, the doctors couldn't understand what happened, how it started in the first place, and how it just got cured later. So nobody knows that, what happened. On massive shifts from being so religiously oriented to totally rejecting religious practices, and then moving on to learning spirituality and astrology, learning about soul, karma. And so my belief system did undergo a major shift or complete transformation during this transit. And I can definitely say this, that astrology gave me an answer to why things were happening as they were. And I'm really grateful to those insights and learnings. So it was a sudden realization or insight into astrology. I didn't learn like going to a school or something. It was just a knowing, and then I researched, And suddenly I was able to understand everything. It was during this transit that I actually started my astrology practice as well. So, yeah, and a lot of solo travels that helped me a great deal dealing with my depression and mental issues, or dealing with every situation that I was going through, because nobody could understand what I was going through, right? To individual freedom that my soul used to crave for ages. And I knew very much within myself that I had to move away from my home environment, and that was something that I achieved during this transit. I grew up a lot in understanding myself, and I understood how toxic my home environment was. Once I let go of that place and moved abroad, because I had put so much trust in that person, right? And when things didn't go as I thought it would go, it was very overwhelming for me. And that was a huge lesson that I learned. Like, everybody has got their good and bad aspects. Nobody is the best or perfect as you think someone is, and nobody is the worst either. So, and everybody has got the same value just like you. These years, sometimes without any rational reason behind, it was putting me into this overthinking loop at many times and living these scenarios in my head, the created scenarios in my head, and which I was constantly dealing with. And people were also making fun of my body during this transit. And I have to say, I wasn't confident enough within myself in the first place. And that's why people felt confident enough to make remarks on the way I look, on how I dressed up. And that was affecting a lot of negative issues within myself. So there was something I did put effort on, and there were times when the effort went or have gone in vain. But that is something that is going to come up, because you cannot see yourself clearly. There will be people who would appreciate you for your looks, and there will be others who would degrade and you will be getting affected by both remarks, because you cannot see yourself clearly during this transit. Who is listening to the negative happenings in the world, or the negative news that you'll see online, not being too much involved in that, because you're going to pick up all those negativity in 100 times greater than a normal person, and you are going to live in those acquired fears from these media. So make sure you're limiting your media into something, not always going through those negative news, world wars, or terrors, or anything like that, unless it's going to affect you in a direct way, because you're going to feel very deeply for the people affected by those, and it's going to affect you as well in a very bad way, that you cannot understand. Some scary dreams as well. And your hygiene habits are going to go through a very roller coaster ride. Like, it would be very difficult for you to take care of your hygiene properly. So make sure you're putting in some effort into that. And the food habits, make sure you're eating healthy, because that is the most important thing, getting your nutrition in the right way. Okay? So make sure, even if you're at the lowest point, you make sure you nourish yourself. Don't skip meals, because that is the only thing that is going to keep you in the best shape once the transit is over. Otherwise, you're going to have to deal with all sorts of health issues during this transit. So the 6th house, okay, the daily routines is very important. That's how you balance out this transit. And nobody will be there to help you when you're going through the worst situations, as that was my case. And everybody that I thought would be there for me were absent from my life when I really needed help. And even when I tried therapy, I was getting the wrong therapists, and nobody was understanding what I was going through either. And that is why I always recommend journaling as well. And do read self-help or therapy books that I transformed my need to compete with others to feel whole. I used to always have this competitive mindset. Like, if I see someone better than me, I would always, have this inner pressure to act or become better than the other person. And there was a lifelong competition that I had, which I overcame during this transit. I understood I am better, I am worthy, and I don't have to prove myself to anyone. That was the biggest realization I received during this transit, because nothing went according to my plan, even if I did put the effort. So ultimately, I realized I have to surrender to what happens, whatever happens, and I was feeling way too lighter within myself, and I think that was the biggest change I could say. I stopped comparing my life to others, even though I was far behind in materialistic or way of success. But I had got a lot during this transit, So worst case, trying to involve too much in others' lives, thinking I could solve others' issues. And probably it was due to my childhood trauma that nobody was there to help me when I was suffering, right? And so there was so much, like, subconscious patterns were coming out so that I could deal with it. And I'm still dealing with it. It's a long way to go, but I'm ending this my journey with the Pluto transit in 12th house by saying that it was one of a kind of journey, I would have to say. I realized a lot about me. I learned conditioned by society, saying that it's our mind that controls our life and our actions, but we shouldn't let our mind control our life. It's much more beyond that. So something that you will learn is that internal happiness doesn't depend on the external situations anyways. And you are a soul who have been sent to experience this life. Experience the life. There is no good and bad experience. Experience is just experience. Just experience it and let it go. Don't try to control situations, and don't try to, make it something that is not the right thing. And yeah, that's it. Just enjoy your life. Thank you.